Hi everyone and welcome to the Dodo Bird Nerd. It's me, the Dodo Bird Nerd, and in today's Magic video, I'm going to be doing a deck tech on Volo Guide to Monsters. We're returning to the green-blue first deck tech I did in the last couple of months with the Gore Muldrak, so we're looping back to green-blue after 3 black-green deck techs in a row, so we've still only done 2 color combinations recently, but I'm sure we'll get to other color combinations eventually. So, without any further ado, let's roll the intro and let's get started. So the first thing that we should go over is what exactly does Volo Guide to Monsters do? So for 2 in green and blue, you get a 3/2 legendary creature human wizard. And whenever you cast a creature spell that does not share a creature type with a creature you control or creature card in your graveyard, copy that spell. And so one thing before I go into specifically what that means for the deck, I would like to mention that by the time I'm recording this video, all 4 commander decks for Adventures in the Forgotten Realms would not have been revealed yet. So there's potentially cards in the remaining 2 decks, because I've seen the first 2, that would potentially go into Volo over some of the other cards in this deck. But at the moment, this is what I'm going with for my personal Volo Guide to Monsters deck. So that's just what I'm going to go for with this deck tech video. So the first thing to notice is there's several stipulations. So if you want to copy creatures, you can have no humans in your deck and no wizards at all in your entire deck, because Volo being out needs to be out in order to copy them. And if they have one of those 2 types, Volo immediately makes sure that they cannot be copied. So no more humans and no more wizards. Another stipulation, no changelings, because even one changeling, whether in play or in your graveyard, means that your entire deck is effectively turned off in terms of copying your creatures, because all of them will have all types, which means all of them will share a type with all of your other creatures. That changeling will have all types, meaning that every single creature card you cast will share a type with that changeling, basically meaning you can never copy a creature again until the changeling is exiled or bounced or shuffled in or whatever, because putting it into your graveyard will not get rid of it unless it's a token, and because those cease to exist in your graveyard after a bit. And then the other thing is, if you want the creature to stick around, you can't run any legendary creatures in the deck unless you have some way to break the legendary rule with like a Mirror Gallery or a new Sakashima. Without that, your legendary will have to be immediately sacrificed due to the legend rule. So with those 3 stipulations out of the way, let's go into the first of only 2 sections, which is creatures to copy. I know, such a shocker that in a Volo deck built around copying creatures, I would give you some important creatures to copy. So we're basically just going to be going in sets of 3. Starting off, we have Abzan Beastmaster, 2 in green for 2/1 Hound Shaman. It basically just allows you to draw cards as long as you have the greatest toughness in your creatures, which is a distinct possibility in this deck. And it covers Dog and Shaman. Then we have Acidic Slime, 3 green for 2/2 Ooze. With Death Touch, when it enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. Well, with Volo, you're actually destroying 2 artifacts, 2 enchantments, 2 lands. So I really wouldn't do the 2 lands bit. Or some combination thereof. And then the final one, this set of 3, is Aetherwind Basker, 4 green for a 7/7 lizard with trample. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, you get an energy for each creature you control. Wait. I just thought that was just... Oh! That card is significantly better than I thought it was. I honestly thought it was just, it enters or attacks, you get an energy. Just 1. That's a lot more energy than I thought it was. Oh! And then you can pay an energy, and it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. That becomes a lot more threatening in this deck than I initially thought, because if you swing with both of them, or even when they both enter, you will get energy equal to twice the amount of creatures you control. And then you can pump them with those energy. That is very good. That is a lot better than I thought it was. So yes, Aetherwind Basker, good card in this deck. Moving on, we have Amphin Mutineer, 3 in a blue for a 3/3 Salamander Pirate. When it enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 target non-Salamander creature. Its controller creates a 4/3 blue Salamander Warrior, and you can encore it out for 4 blue. Again, this covers Salamander and Pirate. The encore will not make another token copy with Volo. However, the initial cast will get you 2 triggers initially, so that's fairly good throughout a game. And then we have another one of the pretty obvious enter the battlefield trigger creatures. Avenger of Zendikar. With the 5 green 5/5 elemental, when it enters, make a plant for each land you control. Seems pretty good making 2 plants for each land you control, and then landfall put 2 counters, actually. Not just 1, 2 counters on each plant you control. So yeah, that's very good. And this is one of a couple cards that if the tokens are made from it, it does actually shut down another card being copied. But I figured since it's one off, it shouldn't come up that much. But it is something to keep in mind with this deck list. Then we have Bird of Paradise, 1 green for a 0/1 bird with flying, tap and 1 mana of any color. Early game can help you ramp out Volo. Late game is copied with Volo, giving you 2 mana dorks instead of 1. Then we have Burnished Hart, 3 mana for a 2/2 elk. You pay 3, sack it, and search for 2 basic lands, put them into play tapped, then shuffle. With early game, again, it can help you ramp out. Late game, copied with Volo, and you get 2 of them that you can sacrifice later on to get 2 basic lands each, which is pretty good. Champion Rhonas, 3 and a green for 3/3 Jackal Warrior. You may exert it as it attacks. If you do, you get to put when you do, you put a creature card from your hand into play. So this is kind of a nombo with Volo, as Volo specifically says cast, not put into play. However, if you can still cheat out these creatures, it's still going to be fairly good later on. So you're throwing the benefit of, I'm not going to get a copy of it, but I am going to be able to free cast it. So that's why it's here. Also, I kind of wanted a Jackal, just to get as many different animal tribes as possible in this deck, which you'll notice is a theme later on with some more questionable creature choices. But yeah, this is just a good card for this deck. Then we have Clever Impersonator, 2 blue for a 0/0 shapeshifter. Enters the battlefield as a copy of any non-land permanent on the battlefield. Getting 2 clones for the price of 1 is pretty good. Then we have Cold-Eyed Selkie, 1 and 2 hybrid Simic for 1/1 Merfolk Rogue with Island Walk. Whenever it hits a player, you may draw that many cards. So, effectively, what you can do is, if you get 2 of them, and even 1 person is playing islands, you are dealing 2 damage every turn, and you are drawing 2 cards every combat, assuming you're swinging with the Cold-Eyed Selkie and its copy, which is pretty good. Colossal Whale is 5 blue for a 5/5 whale with Island Walk. Because apparently we're building this deck around making the person who's running islands not have a good day. And, well, other than you, obviously. And then whenever it attacks, you may exile target creature defending player controls until it leaves the battlefield. With 2 of these out, you can exile 2 creatures per combat, assuming you're swinging with both of them. Which is, again, a very good rate. I mean, if they remove the whale, they get everything back, assuming that something wasn't a token. But still, it's still a fairly good way to get rid of blockers and help you get through with some creatures for damage. And then Corsair Crufix, 1 and 2 green for a 2 for an enchantment creature centaur. Play the top card of your library revealed. You may play the top card of your library if it's a land card, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. So, while the first 2 abilities won't really help with 2 of them, getting 2 life per land is a fairly good rate. Yeah, then we have Craterhoof Behemoth, the 5 green 5/5 beast with haste. When it enters the battlefield, you can get creatures you control get trample and +X until the number X is the number of creatures you control. Yeah, getting 2 of these with Volo is pretty guaranteed to end the game. I don't want to say guaranteed because there's always a chance of a fog or Cyclonic Rift or a Rakdos Charm or something else, but you're probably ending the game if you can copy this with Volo. Similar vein with End-Raze Forerunners, 5 green for 7/7 boar with Vigilance, Trample, and Haste, and it gives all the other creatures +2/+2 Vigilance and Trample until end of turn. Getting 2 of these will be, and be it a smaller buff than Craterhoof, will still probably get the job done in the long run. Then we have Fang of the Pack, 5 and green for 5/3 wolf with melee, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, another target creature you control gains melee until end of turn, or melee. Basically what melee does is whenever it attacks, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each opponent you attack with creature this combat. So if you attack all 3 opponents, the creature with melee will get +1/+1 for each opponent, so +3/+3. And it will have itself, and then its friend, copied, will also have it, so they'll be swinging as 8 6s, assuming you can swing at all 3 opponents, and assuming there's all 3 opponents left. And they will each give a different creature control melee, so you'll have 4 total creatures, assuming all of them swing, that are getting +3/+3, assuming you're swinging at all opponents, which, assuming you have to swing with 4 creatures in order to do that, is not undoable, so it's a fairly good card in this deck. Then we have Fleet Swallower, 5 blue for 6/6 fish. Whenever it attacks, target player mills the top half of their library. Yeah, 2 of these is a fairly good way to get a massive target on your head, but it's also a fairly good way to potentially win the game by decking someone, but be cautious as sometimes mill is not the most fun thing to face. And then we have a really old card with Giant Oyster. 2 blue for a 0/3 Oyster. You may choose not to untap it during your untap step, and you could tap it, and as long as it remains tapped, target tapped creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step, and at the beginning of each of your draw steps, put a -1/-1 counter on that creature. When Giant Oyster leaves play or becomes untapped, remove all the -1/-1 counters from the creature. So, effectively, so what you can eventually do is you can eventually remove a creature with 2 of your Giant Oysters, which very slow, but I'm fairly certain both of them could actually target the same creature if you have 2 of them out, and can slowly whittle it down quicker than if there was just one. So it is definitely a possibility for removal in this deck. And then we have Lotus Cobra, 1 and a green for a 2/1 snake. Landfall, whenever land enters under your control, add 1 mana of any color. So, playing 1 land and getting 2 free mana is a fairly good effect, which is why it is in this deck. Then we have Loyal Guardian, 4 and a green for 4/4 Rhino with Trample. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control your commander, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. 2 of these out with Volo means that you're going to give 2 +1/+1 counters to each creature you control, which is a fairly good rate. Manowar, 2 and a blue for 2/2 Jellyfish. When it enters the battlefield, bounce a creature to its owner's hand. 2 of them out with Volo means you're bouncing 2 creatures. Managorger Hydra, 2 and a green for a 1/1 Hydra with Trample. Whenever a player casts a spell, you get to put a counter on the Hydra. 2 of these out is probably going to end the game really quickly, as they will be getting big for each spell your opponent's casting, and there's 2 of them, actually player, so any spell anyone is casting, and it's player, not player, and they have Trample, well it is player, but they have Trample, and so they will probably be getting through most threats, which means they are very dangerous with Volo out when you cast it. Then we have Mesmerizing Benthid, 3 blue for 4/5 Octopus. When it enters the battlefield, create 2 0/2 blue illusion creature tokens. With when this creature blocks the creature, that creature does not untap during its controller's next untap step. So you'll be getting 4 of those instead of just 2, and they'll have hexproof as long as you control 1 of those 4 illusions. So fairly good. Murkfiend Liege, 2 and triple hybrid green-blue for a 4/4 horror. It gives all your green creatures +1/+1, well, other than it, and it gives all your other blue creatures +1/+1. And then you can untap all green and or blue creatures you control during each other player's untap step, so effectively acting as a Seedborn Muse just for creatures. However, what you can do with that is basically you have free vigilance, and it is pumping up most of your creatures with Volo out, while that last ability isn't going to be copied that much, unless you have some tap effects, which I don't run a lot in this deck, I don't think, but other variations of this deck could probably take more advantage of the Murkfiend Liege. I don't know if that would fully work, it might. Like, untap them, retap, then untap again. I think that might be how it would work, potentially. Someone would have to check me on that. But you will still be giving all your green creatures +2/+2, and all your other blue creatures +2/+2 as well, and they will each actually give each other +2/+2, because it says other, but the other one won't register as itself, so yeah. And then we have Myr Battlesphere, 7 mana for a 4/7 Myr construct. When it enters the battlefield, make 4 Myr. With 2 of them out, you're actually making 8. And whenever it attacks, you may tap X untap Myr you control, and if you do, it gets +X/+1 until the turn, and deals X damage to the player or planeswalker it's attacking. So, fairly good overall, and you're making 8, which means that you can actually do Myr Battlesphere for 8 instead of just 4, which is a fairly good ability. Then we have Overbeing of Myth for quintuple hybrid green-blue. You get a Spirit Avatar with power and toughness equal to the number of cards in your hand, and at the beginning of your draw step, draw a card. Now, this is like the one scenario I'm glad this thing is not a legendary creature, because most of the time, I really want this thing to be a legendary creature, so it could potentially be a commander, in my opinion. All 10 Spirit Avatars should have been legendary. They would have had to change the black-red one, because it's really bad if it's legendary, but it's still, I think they should have all been legendary, because I'm pretty sure it mentions there's one in the story, or the story only refers to one each, so I don't fully know. But at the beginning of your draw step, you draw a card. With Volo out, you'll have 2 gigantic beaters in theory, and you're drawing 3 cards at the beginning of your turn instead of just 1, which is fairly good. Pathbreaker Ibex, 4 green for a 3/3 goat. Whenever it attacks, it gives all your creatures trample and +X/+X until the turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Yeah, 2 of these with Volo is probably, again, like Craterhoof, a bit much, But, you know, if you really need to close out the game and your creatures are a bit lower on the power scale, then Pathbreaker Ibex is a pretty good option. And then moving on to a pet card of mine, Pygmy Hippo, green and blue for 2/2 Hippo. And whenever it attacks and is not blocked, effectively you can choose to not have it deal damage, and then your opponent that it's attacking has to tap all their land, and then they lose all the mana that is floating, and then you get all that mana on the beginning of your next main phase as colorless mana. So they will likely tap all their mana in response to you doing Pygmy Hippo, but it's still a potential thing if it works, and potentially you could politic it. If you need mana to deal with someone else, you could say, okay, I have to swing this Hippo at you. Can you please not tap all your lands, because I need the mana to do this spell to help bring that person down a peg. So it could also have some political aspects to it. I will mention, however, it is a reserve list card, so keep that in mind. Then we have Quandrix Cultivator. 1, a green, a hybrid green-blue, and a blue for a 3/4 Turtle Druid. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic forest or island card, put it into the battlefield, then shuffle. Keely not tapped. And with Volo out, you will be getting 2 lands this way, which is fairly good. Reef Worm, 3 and a blue for a 0/1 worm. When it dies, make a 3/3 blue fish. With when it dies, make a 6/6 blue whale. With when it dies, create a 9/9 blue kraken. So, overall, fairly good ability. And with 2 of them out, you'll be getting eventually 2 9/9 krakens, which is pretty good. Then Runic Armasaur, 1 green for 2/5 dino. When it activates, whenever an opponent activates an ability of a creature land that is not a mana ability, you may draw a card. With 2 of these out, you'll be drawing 2 cards each, which will really tax those activated abilities, potentially make your opponents less likely to activate them, and draw you a lot of cards, which is fairly good. Then we have Scute Swarm, with 2 and a green for 1/1 insect, with whenever a land enters, create an insect. If you control 6 or more lands instead, create another Scute Swarm. And Volo immediately makes sure you start with 2. Have fun with that idea. It could very easily just close up the game with Volo, and you're starting with 2 immediately. And if you're playing it late enough, it is going to get out of control very quickly. Then we have Solemn Simularum with 4 mana for 2/2 Golem. When it enters the battlefield, you get to tutor a basic land and play tapped. 2 of them out, you can get 2 basics. And when they die, you get to draw a card. With 2 of them out, you'll draw 2 cards instead of 1, so basically it's doubling Solemn, which is a fairly good effect. Spark Double, 3 and a blue for 0/0 Illusion. Enters a copy of a creature Planeswalker control with an additional counter on it if it's a creature, or an additional loyalty counter on it if it's a Planeswalker, and it isn't legendary if the permanent is legendary. It basically would allow you to copy various effects of your creatures, maybe enter the battlefield triggers or static abilities or whatever. However, I believe it will also copy Volo. And if you copy this spell with Volo, you will end up with 3 Volos, which means that any future creature spell you cast will end up being copied, have 4 copies of it, instead of 1 or 2 with just 1 Volo, which means this card is very good in Volo. My goodness, that card utterly breaks Volo. There's another card later on that does a similar thing, though probably not as good as Spark Double does. Then we have Steel Hellkite. It's a 6 mana for a 5/5 dragon with flying. You pay 2 and it gets +1/+0 until the turn, and you can pay X. And destroy each non-land permanent with mana value X, whose controller was dealt damage by Steel Hellkite this turn. Activate only once each turn. This allows you to hit 2 different players and potentially get rid of lots of permanents, or get 2 different mana costs of permanents on 1 player. Basically, just giving you a bit more options. Sweet Gum Recluse, 4 green for a 0/3 spider with flash, reach, cascade. And when it enters the battlefield, put 3 +1/+1 counters on each of any number of target creatures that enter the battlefield this turn. Volo will copy the spell, meaning each of them will cascade separately, and eventually get a large amount of counters on the creatures as they enter. Obviously, the creature enters last, which I believe will be the initial Sweet Gum Recluse. Will have the least counters with 3, as well as the creature cascaded will both have 3, but the previous 2 creatures will each have 6, which is pretty good, in addition to any other creatures you had enter that turn. Then Sylvan Caryatid, 1 and a green for a 0/3 plant with Defender and Hexproof. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. Again, early game helps you ramp out Volo. Late game, Volo can copy it and give you 2 mana dorks for the price of 1. Then we have Temur Sabertooth, 2 green for a 4/3 cat. You can pay 1 and a green. You may return another creature to its owner's hand. If you do, it gets indestructible until the end of turn. While necessarily copying this is not the greatest in terms of just sheer effects, if one of them is removed, it does allow you to have a backup to potentially protect Volo, It also allows you to bounce creatures to your hand and then potentially recast them to get more copies of them, and yeah, it's fun. And then we have Terastodon, 6 green for 9/9 elephant. When it enters the battlefield, you may destroy up to 3 target non-creature permanents. For each permanent put into a graveyard this way, its controller makes a 3/3 green elephant. 2 of these out means you can destroy up to 6 non-creature permanents. Sure, you'll be giving your opponents elephants, but you also just got 2 9/9s, so there is that. And then there's Theiving Otter, 2 and a blue for 2/2 Otter. Whenever it deals damage to an opponent, not just combat damage, just damage of any type to an opponent, draw a card. 2 of these out means you might be able to draw some cards off of it early. Again, it's a bit more of a pet card, and I wanted to have an Otter, and this is the one I thought was probably the best one to copy. Eon Frolicker could work, but I just went with Thieving Otter. You could run Eon Frolicker if you wanted, though, instead of Thieving Otter if you wanted. Though, also with Eon Frolicker, you would not be able to run Avenger of Zendikar, and that's probably a better card anyway than either of the 2 Otters. Then there's Thought Sponge, 3 and a blue for a 1/1 Sponge with Flash. When it enters the battlefield, with a number of counters on it equal to the greatest number of cards an opponent has drawn this turn. 2 of them out means you end up with 2 gigantic creatures, assuming they drew a bunch of cards, which, if you're playing this card, they probably just did. And then when it dies, you draw cards equal to its power, meaning you will end up drawing twice that many cards, which is very good in Commander. You'll be drawing a lot of cards in this deck if you couldn't tell. Then we have Vizier the Menagerie, 3 and a green for 3/4 Naga Cleric. You may look at the top card of your library, you may cast the top card of your library as a creature card, and you may spend mana or mana of any type to cast creature spells. Effectively, it just allows you to go a bit further deep into your deck if you need a specific creature out to do it, what you want to do. And then lastly, Wario Copy, 2 and a green for 3/2 Antelope with Vigilance. This is not the greatest card in the world. I admit that. Is this card purely in this deck because it's an Okapi? Yes, because Okapis are my favorite non-extinct animal. So, Wario Okapi is in this deck purely because it's my favorite non-extinct animal, and so there it is. Then moving on to the final category in this deck, which is copying the copy tokens. Kind of already seen with something like a Spark Double or a Clever Impersonator, these 2 cards are purely in here for their ability to copy tokens. First off, we have Twinning Staff, 3 mana for an artifact. If you would copy a spell 1 or more times, instead copy it that many times plus an additional time. You may choose new targets for the additional copy, and you can pay 7 and tap it, and copy an instant sorcery spell you control. You may choose 2 new targets for the copy. Now, previously, this was probably mainly used in decks that were copying a lot of spells. However, in Volo, you can now use it to get an additional copy of each of your creatures, and each additional Volo with something like a Spark Double, I believe will actually trigger Twinning Staff additional times, which can get out of control very quickly, to say the very least. And then we have Second Harvest, 2 green for an instant. For each token you control, create a token copy of that permanent. The copy spells of creatures created by Volo will actually be tokens, which means Second Harvest will actually basically double every token creature you already got via Volo, which is a very good card in this deck. Man, Second Harvest and Maskwood Nexus have been mentioned a lot in these Commander deck techs I've done. Second Harvest, this is its 3rd mention, and I think it was last video was also the 3rd mention of last deck tech was the 3rd mention of Maskwood Nexus. Obviously, Maskwood is not going to be in this deck because it is just bad in this deck. It is really, really bad in this deck. But anyway, what do you think of my Volo Guide to Monsters Commander EDH deck tech? Let me know in the comments down below. Is there any changes you would make to your version of Volo? Let me know in the comments down below. And I will mention that my next video very likely will actually be a return to the Magic Taxonomy series, returning with birds, because as far as I know, there should not be another Commander-related thing, or just new legendary creatures, printed between now and when I would be posting the next video, outside of the ones in this set. And this is going to include my deck tech for both the main set of Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, as well as the Commander decks. Again, I will mention that we do not know, at least I don't know, the remaining 2 Commander decks, secondary commanders, and, well, not secondary commanders, the commanders that cannot be the commander of the deck, but they're also in the deck as a new commander. I hope that made sense. We do not know them at the moment. At least I don't, again. So potentially one of them could end up being Animal Tribal. In which case, I might do a deck tech again on it eventually, but this is going to be my deck tech for Adventures in the Forgotten Realms and the Commander decks for Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. So again, the next video will likely be a taxonomy video. So, If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you all next time. Bye!